your ads aren't working, even if they feel like they are, or if you think they are, or if your media buyer is telling you that they are. Just like everything in your business, ads isn't an exception to this, but what you measure, you can manage, and ads are definitely something that you can be measuring. So if data is something that you love, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for today's episode. Even if you don't love it like me, you're going to find some takeaways and interesting points of how we lay it out.
So here's why I personally love data. Data doesn't lie, but it only works if you're looking at the right numbers. The problem is that there are so many data points you could look at, and your media buyer is typically focused on just a few of those data points. So it can be difficult to know where to start and whether the picture that's being painted for you is actually reality. So today we're going to show you how to track and optimize your lead magnet ads, even if you are not a numbers person. So we're going to start with the alphabet soup, AKA all of the acronyms that you'll probably hear media buyers or myself or other people who are looking at ads talk about. And I'm going to just go ahead and say them the way that media buyers would to start. So that is CPC, CPL, and then we call it CPS, but it could also be just sales or conversions. So what is CPC? That is your cost per click. So if you thought about how much you spent on ads, it's the amount of money you spent to get somebody to actually click on the link, the learn more button, things like that. Your cost per lead is the amount you've spent on ads, and then the actual information you've gotten. So first name, last name, email, and please get phone numbers. Even if you can't currently send text messages, just start collecting that information now. And then your cost per sale is the amount you've spent on ads, and then ultimately the number of sales you've gotten. So when we look at our data, we do want to get that full customer journey. So you'll notice that I went from cost per click to cost per lead to cost per sale. And when we're looking at our funnel, we're looking at it the exact same way. You know, how are we getting them to, want to see more? How are we getting them to give us their information? And then ultimately, how are we getting them to buy? So when we create lead magnets, we're ultimately looking to find our ideal customers so that they actually purchase, right? Like, I mean, it's awesome to have a super huge newsletter list, but if nobody's buying, that wasn't the goal of your lead magnet. And unfortunately, we see this all the time. We talk to people who have been told over and over again by their media buyers that their ads are doing what they're supposed to be doing because they have a low CPC or a low cost per click. They may even have a low cost per lead, but the reality is that if you have a low cost per click and a low cost per lead, but you aren't making sales, your ads are failing. Cheap clicks are not always good. Sometimes it's better if your clicks are more expensive if you're ultimately purchasing. It means that only the people who are ultimately going to buy your stuff are what are clicking. So when we see things like a low CPC, but also then but then a high CPL, so you're not getting a ton of leads, there are things that you need to look at on the back end, like your landing page, things like that you would then need to tweak in order to make sure that you ultimately had data that was showcasing quality ads. And I feel like I could talk about this for 6 hours, Judy. But if you want more details on kind of what the benchmarks we look at for CPC, CPL, and ultimately sales, and then what you should tweak in order to maximize all of those, head to the link in the description for our Ads That Convert lead magnet free guide. It literally lays out everything that we put into literally ads that converted to sales.
Yes. Yes. And it's real data, current data of our clients. And we basically made this because I think one day, Greta, I was like, I just need I need your brain on like one page that I can reference and like stop asking you over and over again. And also stop asking our GPTs over and over again. What are these benchmarks? I'm looking at this data. I need to like help them on their next lead magnet or their next offer or, tweak these things. What do I need to focus on? So it's a simple one page that you can reference at any point in time that you should be looking at. As a CEO, I look at it, at least once a week. So it's super, super helpful. So if you're someone that's like, just give me the info and not, it's super friendly for those people who don't love data like myself. Okay. So you got all of that. You now know where to go, at least on all of the ABCs of marketing, all of the acronyms that we have, right? There's so many of them. So now you have all that data. Now you're like, okay, I hear over and over again, and in the marketing world, online space, we hear about like creative fatigue, creative ad fatigue, and when to swap ads. Or maybe like you're looking at ads and you're like, oh my gosh, I see this all the time. Or maybe you're like, hey, there's that person again, but it's a little different. So how do you know when the need is to update your ad creative, which are your graphics, your visuals, right? Your videos, things like that. So how many should you be doing? Well, first off, and you probably saw this in the series, but we typically start off with 8 minimum of different ad creatives that you do. And then you kind of want those to play out for a couple weeks. Okay. But before we even get to that, just so you know, before we run any new ads, we always start with a sprint test, and we run this for our clients, and we usually start with a minimum of 12 different ones, and all it is a combination of different hooks for your audience to find which ones work for you. We just ran one. If you're watching this live, you probably saw our sprint test that we were doing. It's just text and to see which ones worked. For us, 8 out of 12 worked. So it's great. Like we had it dialed in because of our GPT and our SEO process. So
I do want to say though, it was funny for us even because some of our favorites didn't perform.
No.
But it's like what you sometimes think is going to hit with your audience doesn't, which is why a sprint test is so important. Or Meta just didn't like the words we were using. But
yeah, sometimes we think Meta doesn't love us. But no, you're right, Greta, because we were like, oh, these are gonna really smash. Like they're gonna like do amazing. And then you go and you run them and you're like, huh. So instead of doing it for 14 days to figure that out, we have a process for those people those people who are our Simplicity ad system, especially if you join this next time around. We're really going to dive into the sprint part where you can know that within less like 48 hours. You're going to know exactly which hooks are going to work for you. And then all you have to do is swap out the creative, because it's not the hook necessarily. It's, the creative that you need to change. So you have all the data. An example and a story that I'm going to tell you is we had a client who started working with us a couple months ago, and they were starting to see an increase in cost per lead overworking, right? They've been in business for over 5 years. Common thing that you're going to see, fatigue in your marketing, in your campaign. So we didn't change because initially, right, a media buyer will tell us that it's the landing page. People aren't clicking because it's the landing page or it's the offer or things like that. We're like, no, I think we should start with ad creatives because those haven't been changed for a while. So we simply just created a few new ad creatives and we dropped it down to less than half of her cost per lead. So it was from $8 to under $4 cost per lead. And so updating your creative, that's just a simple way of, if you take anything away from this, if you simply change colors, images, formats, you literally will have be able to impact some of those data points that Greta talked about in point 1. And if you're like, Judy, I've been running ads because you're like 14 days, like you're probably like, oh, I see myself everywhere. I see it everywhere. Yes. Well, let me tell you, somebody who we know and everybody who's watching this probably knows, but Alex Hormozi had the biggest, and he talks about this if you watch his YouTube channel, had the biggest like book launch last year. 500,000 people attended his thing. Like a month before the actual launch, and obviously he was spending lots of money on ads, he was going on a walk, and like he had been approached by like 20 people on his walk. And they didn't know that he had a book launching. And he was like, how can you not know that I have a book launching? Like I'm spending millions of dollars and I already have 400,000 people registered for this event. How can you not know? The entire world knows. So if you think that you are saying you're only getting started, is my point. Once you start to see yourself everywhere, once you hear 20 people say they see you everywhere, you're just getting started. This is
Yeah.
only the beginning. This is only the beginning of spreading your message and spreading your lead magnets and your offers. And so the biggest takeaway from this is rotate your creatives so that way you can stay relevant, on top of mind. And if you don't, if you want new ideas, always head to the ads library. I mean, or your competitors' ads as well. Drop into their campaigns. Those are fun.
Absolutely. So we've talked about CPC, cost per click, CPL, cost per lead, and then ultimately your cost per sale. And Judy talked through kind of the number one way we see to manipulate that data, which is your creatives. Creative fatigue is real. If you think about how often you're seeing an ad, there's a point where it loses its effect to stop the scroll. But what are some other things that you can do with the data? What are some other ways that you can manipulate and ultimately get what you want out of your ads? So I obviously can't go into all of it. We've already talked about how if you go to ads that convert, you're going to see different ad templates, benchmarks, things like that. That can help you create ads, not only for your lead magnet. We've obviously focused on that today, but we actually have different campaigns for like live virtual master classes, things like that. But I want to talk through the fact that we are always looking to make micro shifts in each of those numbers, right? So when you think about your cost per click, we're constantly trying to get that lower. When we think about cost per lead, we're trying to get that lower. When we're trying, cost per lead, yada, yada. And so there are tons of different levers that you can pull for each of those. And with every, shift that you make that has a positive impact, that ultimately means more customers and more profit for you. So, I'm going to just walk through a couple quick tweaks that we have talked about also in previous episodes. So make sure you check out this full series because these are really building off things that we've been talking about. When we see a high cost per lead, Judy talked about how we usually start at the creative step, especially if we're coming in and working with a media buyer who's been on an account for a while and we're taking it over. We don't want to immediately throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to start with the way the funnel goes. So we've talked about creatives. The next part is if your cost per lead is starting to creep up or getting high, you need to look at that landing page. And if you remember, we gave you our outline for what creates a converting landing page. When you think about landing pages for your organic audience, they are full of tons of information. They have, lots of stuff about you. They probably have a good amount of pictures. They're like these feel-good pages. No, not for ads. It literally needs to be catchy heading, call to action about what this lead magnet's going to do to them, for them, 3 bullet points and a button. And we have a full checklist you can check out again in our previous things. So when you think about cost per lead and you start to see that data point creeping up, something you can do with the data is analyze your landing pages. Now, the other piece that we see is a huge lever between cost per lead and then ultimately sales is your email sequences. So if you start to see that you aren't getting any sales from this lead magnet, don't immediately think, I haven't attracted the right people. Well, no, you may not have given them a clear-cut way to buy. And I know you're thinking, Greta, that sounds absolutely crazy. How could I have not given them a clear-cut way to buy? We have analyzed so many funnels where people are getting contact information and then they're not even making an offer for the sale, to book a call, nothing until email 6. Well, you've automatically cut your legs out from underneath you to get those sales. You need to talk about the sale as it relates to the lead magnet or you're not going to get the sale. So when you think about looking at each of your ads, I want you to take a minute and think through, whether you're running ads or not, how can you optimize each stage of that buyer journey? So How can you capture their attention right out the gate? How can you have a landing page that easily converts? And then how can you nurture them to the sale?
Love it. Love it. I love how you wrapped everything, the data into now the action steps. So go back and watch that. If you're like, what do I do now? I know it's for those of you who are watching this, some of you are like, wow, that's a lot. It's a lot the very first time you go and do it because it's not a common way of how we're taught and how we're taught to like we're taught like these big long sales pages and so like everybody thinks like, oh, that's what I need to do too to my ad. And it's like, oh no, it's like too much, right? It's like literally if you were to like go on a first date with somebody and you were like, when do you want kids? Like do you want to be married now? Like what's in your 401k, right? Like it's like all of this stuff. Like if you were to do that, like you don't want to think about that. Your lead magnet opt-in page, your ad is like your first date. It's like your opening line, right? It's the appetite. Like we haven't gotten to dessert or even anything yet. Like chill. So it's a different way of thinking about it. But once you do, you're like, oh, these lead magnet pages are like super simple. And once you add in like using your GPTs of being like, build me, like it's like, you know, an image, a headline, 3 bullet points, a button, done. Like everybody can do that, right?
Yeah.
And we'd love to see them. If you ever want to drop us a DM or anything of your lead magnet opt-in page, we love to look at them. But if you want more details, we referenced it earlier. Greta mentioned it earlier, but head to Ads That Convert. It's in the description. Super simple way for you to lay out exactly what the benchmarks are. You can reference it at any time, totally free to you. We just want you to be super successful in ads. And we know there's so much information out there of like, this is what to do and how. Obviously, ours is mainly coaching programs, but it works for anyone who's selling products or anything like that as well. So, in our upcoming series, we're going to be breaking down one of our favorite people in the world, and I'm sure a mentor to many of you as well, is breaking down how we apply Alex Hormozi's 13 years of business tips to our clients. It is what we use, his frameworks is what we use to help build companies to 7 figures in a year. And we're going to be talking about how we do it, right? Like this is actually not done before. If you like this is pretty much strategy sessions with Greta and I on how we use his business tips to apply to our clients' ads, to their marketing, to their offers, and to their funnels. And so if that interests you, then subscribe because we're not done until your offers and your funnels convert. So we'll see you next time.